So I wanted to continue with the game of life theme and talk about how everything is related to it. So the other day I mentioned that this thing happened in the world around me that's just not possible, and reality itself fights against anybody hearing or sharing that kind of thing too. But maybe that makes me want to do it even more, just knowing that there's a little bit of resistance. The same way the YouTube algorithm wants to suppress certain messages, reality as a whole tries to suppress certain messages. That's just wired into it. It's part of the feature of what goes on. So there's this book written by Mary Rose Barrington, and I think she was born in 1926. I think she did a lot of this research in the 50s and the 60s, she says. But this book here came out later, and it's called JOT. In other words, it stands for just one of those things. Just one of those things, like keys that go missing and then they reappear. So there's this phenomenon that she noticed in life, that there's a lot of times where everyday things and objects that we have them, and then they're there 1 second, and then it's gone, and then it reappears in some odd location, and people stop and notice it. But most people rationalize it away. They shrug it off. They just say it's just one of those things. We make excuses for reality a lot. We always say, well, I must have just gotten it wrong. I must have been mistaken. My memory must be incorrect here. We do that a lot. We excuse the glitches that occur around us because nobody wants to admit that reality does have these points where it happens. And certainly some people do have a wrong memory, and or they exaggerate and they lie. She covers this. She made it her life's research to look at these cases one by one, and she came up with the Siberian salt mine test. So if you were to have this experience happening to you, and if you were to tell somebody else about it, you'd be willing to spend 10 years in the Siberian salt mine if you're incorrect about it. That's the test that she likes to use as to whether or not the story has some validity. But the test I usually do is, to me, there's got to be some kind of give and take. There's got to be a risk versus reward. So I just say, would I bet $1,000? Would I be willing to put $1,000 against this? Yeah, I've got a number of them that I would slap down $1,000 and say this happened to me without a doubt. And there's a lot of situations like that. So her investigation centered around people and their experiences where things have been there and then they disappeared, and then maybe they came back later, maybe they didn't. But her investigation was on people reporting these type of situations, and then also a lot about people reporting ghost-like activity. Now, interestingly, at a very young age, my house that I lived in was full of ghost activity. I saw so many ghosts, so much activity that was paranormal. I had no doubt that there was something weird about reality, that it wasn't quite there. One of my earliest experiences that told me reality's just off is when I plugged in a Christmas decoration that was unplugged. I plugged it in, and there was a cut in the wire, and it was right at my left hand. And instead of getting electrocuted, my hand caught fire, and the tip of my hand was burning, but it didn't burn. There was flame, but there was no pain. There was no smoke. There was nothing. It was just burning. I was just watching it burn in fascination that I could be on fire and feel no pain. So I watched this thing slowly as it just kept going up my arm, and it went across my hand. It got to the sleeve. It kept burning straight up the arm. As I was getting close to the top of my arm, I thought, I don't need to let this continue. I need to put it out, because even though it's not hurting now, it might start to hurt. I don't really know if it could get out of control. I don't want somebody walking in this room seeing me on fire and freaking out. So I shook my arm very hard. And when I did, there was no damage to the clothing. The top of my hand had a very thin layer of black soot, and that was it. That was the only evidence. No smoke, no smell, nothing. I was completely unhurt, unharmed, and I knew this was not normal. I knew this was outside of this physical reality for this to happen. Always been aware, remember it like it was happened yesterday. And yeah, I would lay $1,000 down. I'd lay $100,000 down and say this actually happened. So with the ghost activity, with that experience, there's just a number of things that happened in my youth. I knew that reality itself was much more than what it appeared. And this all fits in with this game of life type thing too. That like this is a created place. This whole place is constructed for us, and we're just living inside of it. And that the thing that it tells me too is, in order for a character, a person, to recognize that something's off about this place, that reality is not real, for you to even make the statement and the observation that reality is not real, tells me that you have to be kind of above this reality. You've got to have a consciousness that rides above this place in order to not be fooled by it completely. If not, you would just be an NPC. You would be a computer-generated NPC completely linked to this system in every way, and you would not be able to detect or notice when things change around you. That's what an NPC would do. Makes you wonder if there are actual NPCs, or whether or not we have people running around here that are unique eternal souls that are just experiencing this constructed playground for them. But for me, the fact that people can see that this place is BS a lot of times, there's a lot of reality that makes no sense, and we point out these things that just can't be possible. It tells me that there's a piece of us that's outside of this place, and we're latched to that greater dimension that is outside of us, that greater world. It's just confirmation to me that that's the case. But just one of those things. This book is a good, it's a good read. It's a good example. I think she really covers the kind of thing that I've seen, and this all ties together with even the war in Ukraine and all the crazy things you see being orchestrated in the world today, and how bizarre the world can get. All of this ties into this game of life theme, because it all starts to make more sense when you start seeing the world for what it really is, which reality isn't real. And then you start looking at it like it's a game. And you start, okay, I can see how that would happen now. But once you start becoming aware that this stuff can happen and does happen, you're more prone to catch it too, because your radar is just, your perception is there that, oh, I noticed this happened the other day, and I can see where that's a glitch in the game. And the game works hard to autocorrect and to cover it up and to make excuses for the thing. I've seen that. The game does. This reality makes excuses for these things that happen, and it'll try to rationalize it away. So the other day, I was telling you, I was getting in my car. It was kind of warm in the car versus the outside because, the heat. I took my light jacket off, a little hoodie type jacket. I was going to throw it in the passenger seat, which I did, but the keys that were in my hand went with it. And I saw my keys. I visually saw the keys go with my hoodie, fall into the jacket, and then they kind of just fell into the jacket and disappeared. So I sat down, and I was going to pull the jacket up and grab my keys, which must be underneath it on the seat, and they weren't there. They were gone. And I thought, well, maybe they slid off the chair somehow. Maybe they fell down the in between the door and the chair. I looked everywhere. I got out of the car, opened the passenger side front door. Hands and knees, I'm down there looking under the seat. I'm looking everywhere. I was like, this is impossible. Where do they go? So I go to the back of the car. Open the door, and I'm planning to get down and look under the seat I'm trying to look under the front seat from the back side to see if I can get a better angle. And the keys, as soon as I opened the door, I saw they're on the back bench seat, way towards the back. I was like, there's no way they had the force of the trajectory, nothing. They couldn't have just, it was just the way I saw them go into the chair next to me. There's just no way for them to have ended up back there. But I did the old shrugging of the shoulders and just said, well, it's just one of those things. But because I've seen this happen before, I was like, maybe this more than likely was one of those glitches that sometimes occurs. I've had this happen with a duck knife that I always kept in the same spot. I was working in the garage. I saw the duck knife there. And then when I was walking back again, I saw it wasn't there. And I was questioning, where did it go? And then later on, I'm coming by there, and the duck knife is right back in the same spot that it's always supposed to be. It was sitting in the same spot again. I knew something wasn't right about that. And on another occasion, a real big one, is we had some fresh sod planted where I'm working. And I grabbed two different garden hoses because I wanted to try different, garden hose heads to see which one worked best. I had a brass one and I had a regular hand, like a plastic hand with a squeeze trigger. That was attached to the hose. I'm watering the sod. I just dropped the brass one to my feet. The grass is like golf course height. I mean, it's super low. There's nothing around me for a good 20-foot radius. I'm just watering the sod and the things at my feet. I go look down and I don't see it at my feet. I look closer and it's nowhere around. I spent the next hour trying to figure out how this thing just fell out of the universe. I dropped it's a 3 or 4 inch brass nozzle that screws on the garden hose. You've seen what those look like. You can't miss it. It's shiny. It's brass. The grass is low cut. It's right at my feet. Gone. Disappeared from the world. And that's another example of a jot. Just one of those things. So let me read a little excerpt out of Mary's book here. Just find something. At the bottom of this page, it starts out saying, expecting paranormal effects to be served up in some framework, it comes as a surprise to find one slipping quietly into the daily round. But once jot has been drawn to people's attention, they begin to notice that something non-conforming has happened and that it merits some serious attention. So that's pretty much what she's talking about, is once it's drawn to your attention that this can happen, then you start noticing and looking into it a little more seriously. But until you can accept the possibility that such things can even happen, you tend to block it. That's just the way we do. She goes on later to say something about this. Jot is also, you may retort, even more far-fetched, but this is not a comparison of like with like, because we have a fair idea as to the nature and limits of bizarre human behavior, and jot is always associated with the human mind. But we have no such basis for assessing the probability of things that, by, quotes, normal standards are impossible. Professor Charles Rickett, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist who testified to manifestations more mind-blowing than jot, once said, "I do not say it is possible. I just say that it happened. And if it happened, it was possible." So in this other section, she says, we must also deal briefly with the question of whether the credibility of human testimony should be accepted as overriding widely held concepts of what is physically possible. While no one has anything to gain by relating tales of the impossible, there is an undeniable fact that some people exaggerate, fantasize, and get things wrong in all sorts of ways. It is also undeniable that normally reliable people of integrity and goodwill may fail to mention important and undermining details, while others, very few in my estimation, may get satisfaction out of hoaxing. Making a good story even better is a common propensity. All this is admitted, and it is fair to allow some discount in the accuracy index, but that should leave a substantial quantum of authenticity. When in doubt, I suggest applying my Siberia test. And that's where she says, would you be willing to go to the salt mines for 10 years if you're wrong here? And that's her Siberian test. She gives example after example in her book of people who report about these cases and these findings. I've had way too many things happen in my own life, and especially starting late 2016. Way too many things for me for even hesitate in saying that this reality is something's up. So I'm going to leave you with that game of life discussion on what happened to me the other day, and this theme keeps coming up that this is really just a game, not to get too wrapped up into it, I guess. Detach yourself a little bit as if it's a game, and then all these crazy events that are happening around the world, rather than stressing you out, can make you laugh. If you might want to read this book that Mary Rose has written, I can relate to a lot of the experiences that she tells about, particularly the ghost activity. I've had some of these jots where things come in and out of my reality, but all in all, she makes some good points. Made her life work studying this kind of thing, and the whole game of life theme is quite interesting to me. So I know this isn't as popular of a message, but because reality itself doesn't want this message, I've seen the resistance from reality itself. It's like an algorithm of its own. Reality has its own algorithm that tries to block people from being aware that reality is not real. There's a vested interest in reality keeping the illusion going, and that's just a fact. Once you realize there is an illusion going on here, and you realize there's more going on behind the scenes, then you can start sitting back and enjoying the show a little bit. But anyway, enjoy your gameplay today. Have a good one. God bless.